Hey guys, what's going on? It's your big dreamer and doer, G Dinero, coming to you today with another Money Monday. Today we're going to talk about what the heck happened in 1971. But first, remember, none of this is tax, financial, legal, investment advice. It's your buddy G Dinero helping you increase your financial literacy to help put you and your family on that path to financial freedom. So with no further ado, let's jump right in. Money Monday. So today's inspiration comes from the website WTF Happened in 1971. Now, if you know what WTF stands for, I apologize for the use of language here. I'm not the one that came up with the name of the website, but when you see the website for the first time, you can't unsee the data. And it all revolves around the money supply and what the heck happened to the money supply back in 1971. Some, 54 odd years ago or so. So, some of the things that happened in 1971. Productivity increased dramatically, but wages did not proportionately. So if you take a look at the productivity and hourly compensation graph in the bottom left-hand corner, productivity has increased. And this was up through 2017. Productivity had increased 250% almost, whereas compensation only went up 115%. And again, there was that inflection point where both had risen from 1948 to 1972 by 90.84%. So basically, compensation went up another 25%, whereas productivity more than doubled and a half again since that time period. If you look at real wages and GDP trade policies in the bottom right-hand corner, bottom line is that median wages are flat for all intents and purposes. The average real wage when adjusted for inflation went up barely. Average real wage with the GDP deflator went up somewhat. Real GDP went up a lot, and real GDP per capita went up through the roof. So bottom line is much more productivity, but wages are not keeping up with productivity. Income gains, top 1%. We hear it all the time, how the wealthy are getting wealthier. Well, that income gain disparity didn't really happen until 1971. As you can see, from 1945 to 1971, the 95th percentile, the median, the 20th percentile, all were going up at the same rate. And then all of a sudden in 1971, the 95th percentile separated away, and those top 5% were gaining more so than anybody else. And if you look in the right-hand graph, all the way up through 1940, the bottom 90% of earners and the top 1% of earners were equal. And then into 1970, the bottom 90% were gaining faster than the top 1%. So take a look at that. From 1940 to 1971, the bottom 90% were gaining up 200%, whereas the top 1% of earners only gained approximately 10 to 20%. Then from 1971 onward, the bottom 1% has had all the growth, and the bottom 90% has actually gone backwards and is down to about 175% growth over that time period. The wealth gap widened. So what does that mean? That means that if you look at the share of, before tax income flowing to the highest households, the top 0.5% and the top 1% have grown exponentially since 1971. They were basically below 5 to 10, in between 5 to 10% growth back in 1971, and they're now about 17 to 22% respectively for the top 0.5 and 1%. That's over 20% of the wealth going to 1% of the population. And again, if you look at the income share of the top 1% relative to the bottom 90%, massive growth since 1971, up 30, almost 30% or so. So just a massive, massive growth or widening of the wealth gap. What else happened in 1971? Well, in 1971, the number of households with both spouses working was around 50%. in 1971, roughly 50%. It's now 66%. And the number of households with only the husband working back in 1971 was around 35%. It says 38, but that was before 1971. It was around 36, 37%, and is now down to 21%, whereas the number of households with only the wife working in 1971 was 3 or 4%, now up to 7%. What does that mean? That means that in many cases, the wife has become the breadwinner, and or both spouses are having to work in order to pay the bills. And thus, marriages are being seen at a later rate, right? 1971, the average woman was around 22 years old. The average man was around 23 years old. Now, 28 and 30 respectively. So people are waiting longer to get married. And that was in 2019. I'd argue that it is much higher today. It's probably 30 and 32, 33 years of age today. More kids and more divorces and more kids in poverty. So if you look down at the divorce rate was around 5-6% going into 1971. Exploded coming out of that. And the 18 to 34 year olds is about 12%. 35 to 44 year olds is just under 20%. 45 to 50 and 55 plus are right there at 26%. That's astounding. That means that the 45 plus group went from around 5% to 25%. That's a 5x increase in the number of divorces. People are basically coming to the point where they just won't stay together anymore, right? The household unit is detonating, and families with children in official poverty through the roof. Single parent families especially, right? So from 1971, the number of families went up somewhat for married couples, but those single family parents with children went through the roof, up over almost 5 million families. I had to sit there and do the math. It's in thousands. So 5,000 thousands is 5 million. 5 million kids that are, or 5 million families, single family households that are in poverty right now. And that was in 2012. Again, I would argue a lot of this data was the data that I pulled off of the website. It could be updated from now to now. You'll see in one of the slides that I did update it to today. I didn't update every single one of them. That would have taken hours to prepare for this. Less kids born. So the birth rate is down. That's the one on the right, the graph on the right there. You'll see that in 1971, it was around 5 children per woman. This was worldwide data. This isn't just U.S. data. A lot of what I've shown you has been U.S. data to this point. This is world data. 5 women per child, 5 children per woman in 1971, down to less than 3, close to 2.5, cut in half. And again, I'd argue if you look at that data today, I believe it's below 2 now. So it went from 5 kids per woman down to less than 2. The world's population cannot be sustained at that rate. You need it to be at least above 2 to replace the parents, essentially, right? Because it takes a man and a woman to have a baby. And if you don't replace them once they pass away, then the population growth stops and actually starts going back in the other direction. Also, trends towards not only less kids being born, but kids are less healthy. A lot of this revolves around the diet. I didn't even put in the diet or the health slides in here. I didn't honestly want to argue with anybody on that one, but guys, the diet, the U.S. diet, the world diet has gone downhill dramatically since 1971. Why? Food is more expensive. Healthy, good for you food is more expensive. So what did they push? They pushed the crap on us over the last 50 years. And I'm a child of this. I was born in 1972, guys. That's the crazy part out of this whole deal. I literally was born 1 year after all these massive changes happened, right? And so you see those obesity levels of kids. Kids had obesity levels in the 5% range back in 1971. Now it's up in the 20% range for a lot of kids. Kids are fat. They don't move like they used to. They sit in front of a TV screen all day long. They're not out working in the fields like the kids of my grandfather and my grandparents did, right? Where they were working and moving all the time. Now they don't move as much, and thus there's obesity. Plus, add in the fact that the food source is not what it used to be, guys. It's not as healthy as it used to be, okay? So that's another thing that happened in 1971. You see this divergence that happened in 1971. What else? Inflation. This is the one we all talk about. Guys, take a look at that. Inflation, cumulative inflation from 1913 to 1971 was 306%. So prices basically went up 300% from 1913 to 1971. What is that? That's like 60 years, roughly. 58, if you want to be exact. Call it 60 years. And then from 1971 to present, now prices are up 2,326%. Look at how it went vertical at that point. This is the left-hand graph that we're looking at, the blue one. That's absurd. Prices just shot through the roof. And then the debt one, this is the one that I fixed, right? It already looked bad. It already looked vertical starting in 1971, right? We were adding on a little bit of debt in this country, right? It was under, this is the United States. It was all the way from 1900 to 1971, well below $1 trillion. Trillion. That's a football field filled with containers of like container trucks, you know, the containers that they shipping containers, filled with $100 bills, stacked too high, filling up a football field. That's $1 trillion, guys. It's a ton of money. And all the way up until about 1980, we were well below $1 trillion. Since 1980, and really since 1971, that's where it started to go vertical. And after 1980, just went straight through the roof. We are now at $36 trillion. Yes, the little bar, if you can see, is in the question mark of the title slide. And it really should be off the top if I was being proportionate with this. I just ran out of room on the slide and I didn't want the bar going all the way off the slide. I added in the 28 trillion in 2021, 31 trillion 2022, 33 trillion 2023, 35 trillion 2024, and we're already at 36 trillion. Can I get 20? Do I hear 37 trillion out there? Do I hear 38? Guys, it's going to be $50 trillion before you know it if this country doesn't stop spending. I'm on a bit of a soapbox today, yes. All this happened since 1971. But wait, there's more. Housing prices have gone through the roof. The average value change versus income change. Notice house values since 1971 skyrocketed 120%. I think that's low, actually. Again, if you were to look over the last 4 years, they've skyrocketed even more. So this data would be up at 140 or 150 if it was to today's housing prices. But look at income. Income started to go up until 2018 or so, and then actually decreased. It's only up 17, 18% since 1971. That's a joke. But houses are 150% more expensive. And how long does it take to save for a house? Well, up until 1971, you notice there was actually a decrease from 1960 to 1970. Do you see the decrease there? From 2.6 years of savings on average to 2.4. So it actually was going down. Houses were becoming more affordable in 1970. And then in 1971, something happened and house prices skyrocketed. And it now takes 6.9 years to earn a house. And by the way, this isn't updated. That's in 2020 terms right there, guys. 2020 terms. In 2020, since then, house prices have skyrocketed and incomes have not. So I would argue that it's probably closer to 7.5 years now. 7.5 years of work just to pay for a house. Just to pay for a house. And it used to be 2.5 years. 2.5, 7.5. That's 3 times longer that you have to work to pay for a house. We're still not there yet. And by the way, I only took maybe the top 7 or 8 that spoke to my heart of the topics that are covered on WTFHappened.com in 1971.com. I only covered a couple of them. This isn't all of them. Crime rates through the roof. We didn't have mass school shootings when I was a kid. It wasn't a thing. There had only ever been, in the 1940s, there was like a handful. There were 5 deaths, 1 shooting, 50s, none, 60s, none, 70s, 1 with 2 combined deaths total. Then in the 80s, we had 7 combined shootings, 90s, 13, 2000s, 5, 2010s, 8, and in 2020s, there's been even more. What the hell, guys? Kids going and murdering each other over what? Right? Look at the number of incarcerations starting in 1971. The incarceration rate was around 100 per 100,000. Males was around 200 per 100,000, and females was barely even on the board in 1971. Now, females are up almost at 100 per 100,000 in the population. The overall rate is 500, and males, 900, guys. Like, where did all this crime come from and why? That's just a summary. Again, go to this website, WTF Happened in 1971.com. Debt increased, inflation increased, the family unit fell apart, housing became unaffordable for many, the wealth gap widened, the rich became richer, and the middle class was obliterated. Values were lost, crime increased, and healthy well-being all went downhill. And you got to ask yourself, why? Why did all of this happen? What happened in 1971 that caused all this to happen? You want to know what happened? Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard once and for all. Money was no longer backed by anything except a handshake deal from our country. That's it. The US dollar was the global reserve currency. That came from Bretton Woods. But in 1971, we came off the gold standard. It was no longer backed by anything except the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. And the full faith and credit of the U.S. government is basically military might at the end of the day. It is backed by nothing. Fiat has zero scarcity. They can just print more at will. They can inflate it at will. They can debase it at will. Unlimited money printing. You hear the expression, money printer go brrr. That's what that means when they say money printer go brr. So if you fix the money, you can fix the world. See, all those problems, people start talking about religious reasons and sexist reasons, right? Women should work and the man should take and do more for the family. And I don't disagree with all these things, guys, but it shouldn't be forced upon us because of the money being broken. It should be our choice if the man wants to stay home and take care of the kids and the woman wants to go out and work. It shouldn't require both of them to go work just to try to save for a house that you can't afford anyway, right? All of it came from a broken money system, one that can be inflated at will, and it's really just modern day debt slavery at the end of the day. It's modern day debt slavery. So what's the solution? It's pretty simple. You need a hard, strong, decentralized money that can't be manipulated, i.e. it's not connected to the government. And by manipulation, I mean you can't just inflate the supply of it at will whenever you feel like it and create more out of it out of thin air with no effort except the pushing of a button. You also need money that acts as a true store of value and retains its value over time. And what is that solution? It's simple, guys. It's Bitcoin. All roads lead to Bitcoin. I personally do not see another solution for this problem in my lifetime right now. I don't. People would say, oh, back it by gold again. They could, but we probably don't have all that gold in Fort Knox that everybody thinks we do. A. B, they're going to have to reprice it all at that rate. C, then they lose control of the system and they can't inflate away their debt problem. So that's what's going to happen. The fiat, they're just going to keep inflating fiat to inflate away the debt problem, which means that in nominal terms or in fiat terms, Bitcoin will just continue going up in value over time, guys. If you haven't already taken a look at it, now's the time to take a look at it. So if you want to see more content like this, be sure to like this video. Like it, subscribe to my channel, comment below. What'd you like best? What did you learn today? What would you like to see more of? I know I was on a little bit of a rant today. I was on my soapbox. I'm allowed to be on my soapbox every now and then. I get frustrated when I see people working so incredibly hard for so very little nowadays. It's not fair the way that the system is set up. And this is a way for us to take back some of our sovereignty at the end of the day. If you learned something and you want to learn more about how to trade, I teach a whole course on TradingView and technical analysis so you can learn to read the charts like a pro. I also teach an entire course on options, how to trade options, everything from the terminology all the way up to doing complex synthetic longs with the quote third leg of the stool, where we turn around and sell covered calls against a synthetic long position. If all that's Greek to you, Greek pun intended, because that's what they call it in options, then go ahead and book a course with me or book an individual appointment. And remember, I'm G Dinero. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm here to help increase your financial literacy, to help put you and your family on that path to financial freedom, guys. Take care, and we'll see you tomorrow.